Imagine walking into a room and knowing, within seconds, who holds the real power, who's insecure, who's pretending, and who's about to make a move. No one announces these things. Talik, tem through posture, through timing, through who they look at, and who they carefully avoid. For centuries, we've been told to listen to what people say. But Machiavelli, the most misunderstood strategist in history, would disagree. He believed words are tools, performances, masks. Reality, truth, lives in behavior, in reactions, in the tiny fractures between what someone wants you to believe and what their instincts accidentally reveal. Tonight, we're stepping into the psychology of power, not the fantasy version, but the one that quietly shapes boardrooms, relationships, politics, friendships, every human interaction you've ever had. Because whether we like it or not, we are always signaling our fears, our ambitions, our weaknesses, our hidden agendas. And the people who rise, lead, and influence at the highest levels, they aren't guessing, they're observing. Machiavelli called it understanding human nature. Today, we might call it emotional intelligence with teeth. By the end of this talk, you won't just hear people, you'll see them. And once you see clearly, you can never go back to being blind. The fastest way to understand a person is not by studying how they relax, joke, or make small talk. It's by watching them when they want something. Desire changes, posture, tone, patience, and even morals. The moment a goal appears: status, approval, control, affection. Advantaged people begin to reveal the machinery behind their personality. Composure becomes strategy. Kindness becomes currency. Confidence might become performance. Need sharpens behavior, and in that sharpening, truth slips out. Most people believe personality is consistent, but it's actually someone who seems calm and generous when nothing is at stake can become guarded, competitive, or manipulative when a reward enters the picture. Why? Because desire activates priorities, and priorities expose values more honestly than words ever will. When there is something to gain, people unconsciously show you what they are willing to trade for it: time, integrity, loyalty, attention, even other people. Watch how someone behaves when they want to impress. Do they listen? Or just wait for their turn to speak? Do they exaggerate stories, name drop, subtly compete? The effort to elevate their image often reveals insecurity or ambition levels far more accurately than any A person who claims to be humble but constantly angles conversations back to their achievements is telling you exactly how badly they need recognition. Fear of losing something is just as revealing. When status, control, or approval feels threatened, masks crack. A relaxed colleague may become defensive. A charming partner may turn cold. A confident leader may suddenly micromanage. Loss triggers instinct, and instinct bypasses the polished identity people work hard to present. In those moments, you are no longer seeing who they want to be seeing. Asu are seeing what they are protecting. Competition is another truth serum. Introduce rivalry, and you'll quickly learn who collaborates and who quietly undermines. Some people rise by improving themselves. Others rise by diminishing others. The difference rarely shows up in calm environments. It appears when attention, promotion, or admiration is limited. Scarcity reveals character structure. Even attraction is revealing. Romantic or social interest makes people adapt in telling ways. Some become overly agreeable, reshaping opinions to secure connection. Others become performative, amplifying traits they think are desirable. A few stay grounded and consistent, which often signals internal security. Watching how someone modifies themselves when they want to be liked tells you how stable their identity really is. Desire also exposes patience levels. When someone wants a result quickly, observe how they handle delay. Do they become irritated, passive-aggressive, pushy? Urgency often strips away social grace. The ability or inability to tolerate waiting shows emotional regulation, entitlement, and long-term thinking capacity. There's also a difference between what people pursue and what they claim to value. Someone might say, family comes first, but consistently sacrifice time at home, for recognition at work. Another might preach honesty, yet bend the truth when reputation is on the line. When actions under desire contradict stated beliefs, believe the behavior. Want is the force that rearranges honesty into hierarchy. None of this requires confrontation or interrogation. In fact, people are most readable when they don't realize they're being observed. You're simply noticing shifts. Energy rising, tone tightening, humor disappearing, charm increasing, boundaries bending. These changes are psychological tells, and they appear automatically when motivation intensifies. When nothing is at stake, people perform who they think they are. When something is at stake, they reveal who they actually are trying to become, protect, or prove. That difference, the gap between comfort and desire, is where real personality lives, and it shows itself in micro choices, not speeches. Want to understand someone quickly? Stop focusing on what they think and start asking asterisk. Why asterisk? They do what they do. Deep down, most of us are driven by one of three core emotional forces: fear, the need for belonging, or pride. These drivers shape everything: how we react to pressure, what persuades us, and even how we see the world. Once you spot someone's primary driver, their actions suddenly make a lot more sense. First up, fear. Fear-driven people build their lives around avoiding loss, failure, or embarrassment. It's less about winning and more about not losing. You'll see them hesitate before making a choice, over-prepare for tiny risks, and constantly seek reassurance. In conversations, they're always scanning for danger, watching your reaction, softening their statements. Criticism, even when it's helpful, feels like a personal attack. When they get stressed, they might get defensive, or just shut down. Their loyalty goes to whoever makes them feel safe, not necessarily who's most inspiring. They thrive on stability and clear rules. Next, we have the belonging-driven. These individuals are all about connection, approval, and group harmony. Their biggest win is feeling included and valued. They're social chameleons, quickly adapting to the energy of a room to fit in. They're the peacemakers, the ones who jump in to smooth over tension. But this need for acceptance can make them avoid important disagreements. They might say yes on the outside while screaming no on the inside, just because the thought of disapproval is too painful. Praise is their fuel, and being left out is their kryptonite. They often ask, "How will this affect my relationships?" before they ask, "Is this the right thing to do?" Finally, let's talk about pride. Pride-driven people are motivated by recognition, status, and the feeling of being significant. They want to stand out, to be seen as exceptional. Achievement and influence are what get them out of bed in the morning. They're often competitive, decisive, and willing to take big risks if it means getting noticed. In a conversation, they'll subtly guide the topic back to their own accomplishments. Criticism can feel like a direct threat to their identity, causing them to dismiss it entirely. They love a challenge that lets them prove their worth and get bored in roles where they feel invisible. Under pressure, they might try to control everything or refuse to admit they made a mistake. Here's why this matters. These drivers act like filters. A simple, neutral comment can sound like rejection to a fear-driven person, like indifference to a belonging-driven person, and like disrespect to a pride-driven person. The same event, three completely different reactions. This is why just using logic to persuade someone rarely works. You have to appeal to their core emotional need. So, how do you spot someone's driver? Pay attention to what triggers their strongest reaction. Is it uncertainty? Is it social tension? Or is it not getting credit for their work? Notice what they complain about when they're stressed. What kind of praise makes their face light up? And which setbacks they can't seem to let go of? Of course, nobody is 100% one type. We're all a mix. But most of us have a primary emotional engine that quietly steers our choices. Once you understand that engine, you're no longer confused by someone's behavior. You're seeing the emotional logic that drives it all. Thanks for watching. If you found this helpful, give this video a like and subscribe for more insights into human behavior. See you in the next one. What people say is carefully edited. What they feel leaks out in the seconds before they can manage it. That is why reactions are more reliable than statements. When you're retrying to understand someone quickly, a statement is constructed, a reaction is revealed, one is cosine. The other is automatic. Most people have had years of practice explaining themselves. They know how to sound reasonable, kind, confident, open-minded. They've built verbal identities that reflect who they want to be seen as. But reactions happen in real time, before self-image has a chance to step in and do damage control. A flicker of irritation, a pause that's slightly too long, a smile that doesn't reach the eyes. These are glimpses of the emotional truth running underneath the social performance. Change is one of the fastest ways to trigger honest reactions. Propose a new plan, shift an expectation, introduce uncertainty, and watch closely. Someone who claims to be flexible may tense up, go quiet, or start listing obstacles. Another who says they dislike attention may visibly brighten when spotlighted. The gap between declared traits and instinctive responses is where accurate reading begins. Credit and recognition are another pressure point. Notice what happens when someone else is praised. Do they join in easily, or does their expression tighten before they add a compliment? Do they redirect the conversation toward their own contribution? Do they withdraw? Envy, insecurity, confidence, and generosity all show themselves in these small, unguarded moments. Few people can fake a gracious reaction instantly when their ego has just been nudged. Disagreement is equally revealing. Words during debate can sound calm and logical, while the body tells a different story. A person who is comfortable with differing views stays physically open, maintains steady tone, and responds to the idea itself. Someone who feels threatened may interrupt more, speak faster, lean forward aggressively, or smile in a way that looks more like baring teeth than warmth. Even silence as texture. Reflective silence feels different from resentful silence. Watch timing. Genuine reactions are immediate and subtle. Performed reactions often arrive a beat late and slightly exaggerated. The delayed laugh, the overly dramatic gasp, the enthusiasm that seems switched on rather than rising naturally. These suggest social calculation. It doesn't always mean deception, but it does mean the person is managing perception rather than expressing instinct. Stress compresses the distance between feeling and display. Under pressure, tight deadlines, public scrutiny, unexpected problems, reaction patterns intensify. A normally patient person may snap. Someone who appears confident may start seeking constant validation. A self-proclaimed team player may quietly shift blame. Stress doesn't create new traits. It amplifies what's already there, but usually controlled. Body language during reactions often contradicts spoken reassurance. I'm fine with it paired with a jaw clench. No pressure at all delivered with rigid posture. Take your time spoken while glancing repeatedly at the clock. The body moves faster than the narrative, and it rarely aligns perfectly when emotions are involved. Even positive reactions carry information. How someone responds to good news tells you what they value. Do they celebrate others highly, or turn the moment into comparison? Do they ask curious questions, or quickly relate everything back to themselves? Joy reveals priorities just as clearly as frustration does. The key is not to judge single moments in isolation, but to notice patterns across situations. One tense reaction could mean a bad day. Repeated reactions in similar contexts point to underlying driver status, fear of exclusion, control needs, approval seeking. Statements tell you the story a person prefers. Reactions show you the story the nervous system is actually living in real time. Personality is not a fixed performance. It shifts depending on who is in the room and where someone stands in the hierarchy. Power changes, posture, tone, generosity, and restraint. If you want to read someone accurately, don't just observe how they treat you. Observe how they treat people above them, below them, and those they don't need anything from. Status reveals values faster than charm ever could. When interacting with those they perceive as higher status, people often display their most controlled behavior. They may become more polite, more agreeable, more attentive. This isn't automatically insincere. Awareness of authority is natural, but the degree of change is telling. Someone secure in themselves stays respectful while remaining consistent in tone and opinion. Someone driven by status anxiety may laugh harder, agree faster, and soften their stance even when they privately disagree. Excessive flattery, constant validation seeking, or visible nervousness around power suggests their self-worth is strongly tied to approval from above. Now look at the shift when they engage with those who hold less power. This is where unfiltered attitudes toward control, empathy, and respect emerge. Do they maintain the same level of courtesy with service staff as they do with executives? Do they interrupt, dismiss, or ignore people who can't influence their success? Or do they remain attentive and patient regardless of rank? Consistency across status levels signals internal stability. Sharp contrast signals performance. Kindness that only flows upward is strategy, not character. Peer interactions offer a different set of clues. Among equals, competition and insecurity surface more easily. Watch for subtle dominance, behavior stalking over others, claiming ideas, shifting credit, turning conversations into comparisons. Some people collaborate naturally, building on others' input. Others treat every exchange as a ranking exercise. How comfortable someone is sharing space, attention, and influence with equals reveals how threatened they feel by similarity. Power also affects physical presence. Around authority figures, a person might shrink shoulders tighter, voice softer, or expand in an attempt to prove worth. Around subordinates, that same person may spread out, speak more bluntly, or take up conversational space without noticing. These shifts often happen unconsciously. The body adjusts to perceived rank before the mind rationalizes the behavior. Notice who someone tries hardest to impress. Effort is a spotlight. If all their energy goes upward, ambition is likely a primary driver. If they focus on maintaining approval within their peer group, belonging may matter most. If they assert control downward, they may equate leadership with dominance rather than responsibility. None of this requires them to say a word about their values. Their attention patterns already reveal them. Another signal is how people behave when power dynamics temporarily reverse. Give someone a small amount of authority a chance to lead a project, make a decision, or enforce a rule. Do they become fair and thoughtful, or rigid and controlling? Power doesn't corrupt as much as it exposes. It magnifies existing beliefs about entitlement, trust, and respect. Discomfort with hierarchy is revealing too. Some individuals become visibly uneasy when roles are unclear. They rush to establish who's in charge, who defers, who decides. Others are comfortable in fluid dynamics, adjusting without needing constant status confirmation. Rigidity around rank often points to insecurity about one's own position. By watching these shifts across contexts, you begin to see the difference between social skill and social strategy. Social skill is adaptable, but grounded. The person remains essentially the same. Social strategy changes dramatically depending on what can be gained or lost. The greater the personality swing between levels of power, the more their behavior is driven by position rather than principle. People work hard to present a coherent identity. They choose labels, values, and stories that make them feel consistent and understandable. But human behavior is rarely that tidy. The fastest way to see beyond the image someone projects is to notice where their words and actions don't line up. Contradictions are not random flaws. They are signals pointing toward hidden priorities, fears, or desires that are stronger than the identity the person is trying to maintain. When someone repeatedly says they dislike drama but are always surrounded by conflict, that gap is information. Either they are unconsciously drawn to emotional intensity, or they benefit from the attention that conflict brings. Their self-description may reflect who they wish they were, while their behavior reveals what actually stimulates them. The contradiction shows the tension between self-image and emotional reward. Pay attention when people claim a value but act against it under mild pressure. A person might insist they value honesty, yet soften or distort the truth when their reputation is at stake. Another may say relationships come first, but consistently prioritize work when recognition is available. These inconsistencies reveal hierarchy, not of morals, but of motivations. What someone does when values collide shows which need wins. Contradictions also appear in confidence displays. Someone may present as highly self-assured but react strongly to small slights or minor criticism. True confidence is stable. It doesn't require constant defense. When boldness and fragility sit side by side, you're likely seeing armor, not certainty. The louder the self-praise, the more carefully you should watch how they handle being overlooked. Even generosity can contain contradiction. A person may be publicly giving but privately resentful, keeping mental accounts of what they've done for others. They speak the language of selflessness while emotionally operating on exchange. Their frustration when appreciation isn't immediate exposes the transaction underneath the gesture. The behavior is kind, the motivation is conditional. Contradictions often show up in control dynamics. Someone who says they're easygoing may become rigid when plans change. A person who claims not to care about status might frequently mention titles, networks, or comparisons. These moments are not hypocrisy in a moral sense. They are psychological slips, where the unconscious priority overrides the preferred identity. Notice emotional contradictions too. Words may express support, while tone carries irritation. Someone might say they're happy for a friend's success, yet their energy drops, their smile tightens, their questions disappear. The conscious mind delivers a socially correct response, while the emotional system reveals rivalry or insecurity. Both layers are real, but the involuntary one is usually more predictive of future behavior. Stress increases contradictions, because it weakens self. Under pressure, people default to their strongest drives. The patient person becomes abrupt. The humble person becomes self-protective. The flexible person becomes controlling. These shifts don't create new traits. They uncover the ones normally kept out of sight to preserve a preferred self-image. The key is to observe patterns, not isolated moments. Everyone is inconsistent occasionally, but when the same mismatch appears across situations, it points to an internal conflict between who someone believes they are and what they emotionally need. That conflict is deeply informative. It tells you where persuasion will work, where trust may break down, and where resentment might quietly build. Image is crafted in calm moments. Instinct shows up in pressured ones. The space between those two versions of a person is where their unspoken motives live, and those motives shape decisions long before explanations catch up. If there's one thing to remember, it's this: people are constantly telling you who they are, just rarely in words. They reveal themselves in what they chase, what they fear, what unsettles them, what excites them, and how they shift when power, pressure, or opportunity enters the room. The surface personality is the story. The patterns underneath are the truth. Machiavelli understood something most of us are never taught. Human behavior follows incentives, emotions, and hidden priorities, more than ideals or declarations. When you stop taking statements at face value and start observing reactions, motivations, and contradictions, you move from being surprised by people to understanding them. And this isn't about becoming cold or manipulative. It's about becoming aware. When you see clearly, you make better choices. Who to trust, who to partner with, when to push, when to pause. You stop personalizing every confusing interaction because you recognize the emotional forces driving it. You also begin to see yourself more honestly. Your own reactions, your own contradictions, your own emotional drivers. Because the same principles that help you read others also reveal the patterns guiding you. Power, in Machiavelli's sense, was never just about controlling others. It was about understanding human nature without illusion. The moment you learn to see what people consistently do when something is at stake, you stop navigating blindly. You start navigating strategically, calmly, and with far fewer surprises. And once you learn to read the signals beneath the words, every room you enter begins to make a lot more sense.